Hello, everybody. This has already been such a rich day of sessions and discussions, and we really appreciate you sticking with us to our session. We're so grateful to have you here, and we look forward to learning with you and learning from you. So before I turn it over to my colleagues, I'm just going to say a few words about who we are and what we're hoping to get out of today's session, which is focused on mapping, visualizing, and analyzing data more effectively with a tool that we've developed at CanWaCH as a case study. My name is Jessica Fern. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Director of Global Health Impact at CanWaCH. I'm joined here by my colleagues Emayan Ocon, the Project Explorer Officer, and Melody Tondeur, our Manager of Metrics, and they'll be speaking with you in just a minute. As was mentioned, we are a Canadian organization, and so I'm coming to you from my home in Ottawa, which is also on the traditional and unceded territories of the Algonquin First Nations people. And I'm grateful to live and to work here. And before going any further, of course, we'd also like to wish Ramadan Mubarak to our Muslim colleagues joining us here today. So for those of you who haven't heard about CanWaCH, I keep thinking of us as a relatively new organization, but I truly can't say that anymore. We've been around a good 5 years now. CanWaCH stands for the Canadian Partnership for Women and Children's Health. We are perhaps best thought of as a consortium of more than 100 organizations like civil society groups, academic institutions, private sector entities, and individuals, all of whom are working at the critical intersections of global health and gender equality. These organizations represent Canadian actors, but of course work intimately and closely with global partners around the world. We're also very proud that the support for the work that we do, particularly the Project Explorer that we will talk about, is a project in partnership with the Government of Canada through Global Affairs Canada. We have a variety of different mandates at CanWaCH, but these all center around strengthening the way in which Canada and its global partners advances the health and rights of women, children, adolescents, and their communities worldwide. And one of the teams through which we do that is our impact and metrics team here at CanWaCH, where we focus on supporting the capacity of partners to better collect, analyze, interpret, and use the stories of the impact of their work to partner more effectively and ultimately to do better work. So the way that we are planning to run this session today, we'll start off with my colleagues giving you an overview of our Project Explorer tool, what we call the Prox for short. They'll give you an overview of how it came to be and what we're currently doing and where we're going with it. But this is still a tool that's kind of continually under review for us. And we have a lot of linkages to IATI, but we also have a lot of questions. And so what we hope to do is to go into breakout rooms with you so that we can have perhaps a more intimate discussion to really tackle some of these questions around how do we talk about impact at the project level? How do we talk about it at the collective level? What are the kinds of ways in which a tool like this can link into and amplify the impact of IATI's data? So really, we're going to get you to work for CanWaCH for a few minutes. We will do a few different breakout sessions. And just to note that because we are Canadian, we are a fully bilingual platform in both English and French. So our discussion groups today will include a breakout session specifically in French so that folks can participate in the language of their choice. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when it comes to time for that. But we look forward to learning with you, as I said, and with that, let me pass it over to my colleague Melody to take us through some of the details of the Project Explorer. Melody, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica, for the introduction. So I'm very happy to be here today and present the Project Explorer to you all. Here you can see the landing page of the Project Explorer, and my colleague will be sharing the link via the chat, and she's just done it. And we decided today not to spend time doing demos because, as Jessica mentioned, we would much rather spend time speaking with you and learning from you. So we opted to just do a couple of screen shares here and there rather than go right onto our platform. So what's the Project Explorer? It's an open access platform with the primary focus of capturing the full spectrum of effort in global health and gender equality, with a link to Canadian funding from any sources or a link to Canadian actors. The Project Explorer includes data from civil society organizations, academic and research institutions, multilaterals, as well as the private sector and the public sector. It captures data on areas of focus linked to the health sector, as well as beyond, and we will show you examples later on. Projects included are funded by all sources of funding, whether they are funded from government sources or non-government sources. It displays projects implemented internationally as well as domestically here in Canada. And finally, data is captured on 20 standard fields, and we will talk about a few of those later on. So now, what value does the ProX offer? So the Prox was created as an accessible platform for learning to strengthen monitoring and evaluation processes and to improve programming and decision-making. The first version was launched in 2017, and the development, as mentioned by Jessica, the development to date was solely funded by Global Affairs Canada. So some of you may be familiar with Global Affairs Canada and might know their project browser. We had a beautiful demonstration this morning from Johanna Luscher on the project browser. So in the browser, Global Affairs includes all international projects they fund. The browser is aligned with the IATI standard, and Global Affairs Canada publishes to IATI on behalf of the partners they fund. The browser is therefore completely controlled by Global Affairs Canada staff. The idea behind the ProX development was to build a platform that was user-generated with real-time updates to complement what the GAC browser offers, so to complement with additional information, and also to feature non-government funded project to draw a comprehensive picture, a comprehensive Canadian picture of efforts related to global health and gender equality. The goals of the ProX are to promote collaborations and to create valuable partnership by allowing organizations to identify common areas of interest or to find prospective funders or partners by looking at who is doing what, where, and how. Another added value is that it allows to showcase specific impact stories and draw case studies to foster a culture around transparency and collective accountability. Now, how is the data collected? So we have a data entry portal where users share their data directly. And once the users submit new information, it is first reviewed by us at CanWaCH before we publish them live. We outreach for data using what we call data drives several times a year. And we do that in two different ways. So we do what we call general outreach, where we call on our users to update an existing project or to add new ones. And then we do what we call pieces data drive or targeted data drive, where we do calls for specific data fields only. So rather than outreaching to people to remind them to update a project or to add new ones, we ask them to update one specific data field at a time. And what we find is that we get a much higher response rate with those pieces data drive because it's quicker for organizations to share when it is focused and it requires less time. So finally, the last point here on the slide is about online resources that we gather from organization websites and publish material to complement the missing data or to get new data. So now onto the key features briefly. Many are similar to the other platforms we heard earlier today and all the features. So it's an open access platform. All data fields are optional. We have 2 official languages here in Canada. So the platform is fully bilingual in French and English. Project can be searched by filters and keywords. Each project has an individual page with key details, a map and results highlights, and data is aggregated and visualized in our analytics portal that was just shared here by my colleague. And in the analytics portal, we aggregate the data and visualize it, and we will show you examples later on. And finally, all data files are exportable in CSV format. We wanted to show you where do we use ProX data. So we use the data in various publications that we have at CanWaCH, where we analyze collective progress, where we identify gaps and provide recommendations for concrete actions. Our biggest publication is our yearly Global Health Impact Report, being shared in the chat now. And if you go to the Project Explorer section, you will see how we summarize the data in an easily digestible format in our report. The Prox data is also used to create country profiles and customized maps. A good example of this is our involvement in coordinating a country working group for Canadian partners working in Haiti in the health sector. We've been coordinating that group for the past 3 years. And each year we create a map of intervention led by Canadian partners in Haiti, and we share the map with the Ministry of Health and with local partners in Haiti. We also use the Project Explorer data to analyze Canadian investments in priority areas, for briefing notes for events, for example, or for special reports that are used by various sector working groups here in Canada or coalitions to inform policies and advocate for increased investments. The last point on the slide, there is the use of the Prox for public engagement in our social media campaigns. And as well, we've also heard that the Project Explorer is being increasingly used as a resource across Canadian universities for students studying global health. So that wraps very briefly the first part of the presentation. And now I will pass it over to Imayan, who will tell us more about the process of development and the specific links to IATI. Over to you, Imayan.
Thank you, Melody. Hello, everyone. I'll just quickly mention that we'll be taking questions as in the discussion room when we break out. So you can please post your questions in the chat box for now as they come to you. Okay, so let's go in. Now that we know what the Project Explorer is and what it offers, let's take a look at the process that was involved in developing this tool, the challenges, successes, and lessons learned to bring us to where we are today. From the onset, it was important to build this tool with input from sector partners, and true to CanWaCH's nature, we ensured it was a collaborative process. We started off by consulting with our members, colleagues, and experts in the field through surveys, calls, consultations with our working groups, asking for feedback. The goal, like Melody said, was really to have this tool be a user-driven one, and we wanted to know what people wanted, what would be of use to them. And essentially organizations want to know what is out there. They want to know what timely information is available on what is true right now. And so we did an assessment of what data to collect, starting by consulting with the Global Affairs Canada project browser that has been mentioned, and IATI. And our goal was not to duplicate both databases, but rather to complement the data that they have in a different way and in a more easily understandable language. So not only did we consult that, we also consulted other platforms like NGO AidMap to get more insights on what we could incorporate into the Project Explorer. And using the feedback that we received from these discussions, we've improved the Project Explorer to the version that we have now. And as we've mentioned that, this is an ongoing process, and we continue to find ways to increase the effectiveness and the use of the Project Explorer. And my colleague will share in the chat box methodological notes, which he just put there. And you can take a closer look at the detailed steps that we've used for coding and data management processes, as well as standard practice for data entry, extraction, and aggregation. Melody talked about data entry processes. So those are things that you can find clearly in methodological notes. Now, to ensure that the data we have in the Project Explorer is up to standard, we aligned our data fields with IATI. And we have 2 common data fields that we use to merge the databases and facilitate compatibility if we need to. And these are the IATI identifier and organization identifier. Now, however, we have some differences in, say, the terminologies and categorization that we do. For instance, with the regions, areas of focus that we've been able to map out to the over 200 sector codes that are available. We've organized organization types somewhat differently, and our budget breakdown is simplified by funders, areas of focus, countries, and region, whereas IATI's is more in-depth and a little bit different from the way we capture ours. Now, when it comes to the unique data fields to the Project Explorer, we have specific tags, for instance, for target population groups. And each project, we're able to tag what communities and groups that they work with, such as, for instance, there's internally displaced people, refugees, and rural and urban. And we'll see this in the coming slides as well. And essentially, this is just to make it easier as well to be able to aggregate that data compared to when you're trying to tease out that information from text descriptions. It can be a little bit difficult. We also ask for population data on people directly impacted by the project and those impacted indirectly as a byproduct of the project activities. Now, when it comes to sex and age disaggregated data, it is displayed in aggregate on our online visual with the analytics portal, which we'll get to see in shortly. Now, we faced quite a bit of, some challenge in aggregating data from multiple projects. As you may know, many projects use different descriptors for the populations that they target, as well as different age ranges. For instance, a project might include adolescents and adults when referencing women of reproductive age, or they may use, for some countries, youth definitions are different, some as low as 10 years and some over 30 years for different countries. So essentially, we needed to find the best ways to collect and report this data in a way that was straightforward but useful. We also heard from members, from discussions, this question about what project partners to capture, and this is important to know who is working on the projects beyond just those that were formal. And this also goes back to what was said at the opening plenary session as to what information we can glean, when we look into local leadership and the importance of organizations recognizing those partners that they're working with on ground. And, this really is useful when we're making those global to local connections. Now, in terms of our project resources, we have quite a unique resource database where we are able to collect resources like questionnaires, surveys, analyze data sets, posters, radio messages in different formats and in different languages, so that this is available for people to access if they need information to guide their programming. And so I'll just quickly take us through just a few snapshots of the analytics portal and won't waste too much time on this. I mentioned the differences in the region. For mapping and visualization here, we needed to assign countries to regions, and we use the UN code list here instead of IATIs, and we are able to aggregate this data on the global scale and see this by regions, as you see the breakdown of the regions there. Here you can see the 29 areas of focus that I mentioned. We made it easier for organizations to group their work into common areas to describe the focus of the projects. So giving them these buckets of categories to choose from, making it easy for users to interpret this as well based on interest. For instance, you have, like nutrition, sexual reproductive health, gender equality, and so on. And this was what we were able to do coming down from the several sector codes that exist. Now here we're looking at a snapshot of Haiti as an example in the past decade. And these are the organizations that have been leading projects in Haiti. You can see the number of organizations, you can see a number of projects and the funds invested over the past decade. And you can see how we could categorize these organization types here. We are able to group them into the NGOs, academic, private and public sectors, and also going further to also classify them as Canadian versus non-Canadian organizations. Here we can take a closer look at those population descriptors that I mentioned. You can see communities that are being targeted by projects. They're able to tag those refugees, indigenous populations. You can see LGBTQI communities. You can also see the breakdown by gender and age. And using this, and you can also see direct and indirect population. Now, I just want to point out that, as we mentioned, data collection and we know the ongoing process of adding data, the Project Explorer contains projects that are both new and some that are long closed. And so in those cases, sometimes you might have limited available data. So wherever relevant, sample sizes are noted to ensure that we are giving a proper and accurate representation. For instance, this example with Mali, we have 15 projects that reported population data out of the 35 that we have here. So you can see that clearly and see how much. Thank you. Now, more here, when we look at categories that we've been able to come down to, we've also narrowed this down to project outputs. You can see this based mainly on the most commonly shared outputs that projects are producing, the results and the work that they're doing. And here you can see where this work has been done and with what communities as well. And you see all the breakdown, the population details, and you're able to identify where gaps exist. Now, again, just to be mindful of the fact that the data we have does not cover the entirety of the work that is being done out there, and know that we really work with what the data gathered to date and the information we have. And this poses challenges, as we know, and you see that even with what we have in terms of data sharing, we've been able to take our Project Explorer to a level where we have partners sharing this data with us. And I'll just talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, please. So now, in terms of successes, a lot of our success has been based on building relationships and connections with our members as we establish the network, making outreach personalized and sustaining the engagement to the point that we have 95% of our members sharing data with us. And we've been able to apply this approach as well to our non-members. So, how did we get here? Melody mentioned PC's data drives, for instance, and this was something that we were able to come up with based on comments and responses we got from surveys around people being reluctant to share data for different reasons, maybe time consuming or feeling like they didn't have robust or complete data to share. So it was really important to tackle this by giving the opportunity to share what was available at the time and what information they had, and also breaking it down to specific requests so that it made it easier for them to share the data with us. And with that, the question of data completeness comes up, and we ask what we can do or say with the data we have, essentially. So it's not just about telling the story of the sector and Canada's contributions, but thinking about what story our data can tell us. What can we say with what we have at the moment? And can we report on the progress that is being made? Yes. And in particular areas? Yes. And are we able to identify gaps based on what we have? And if this is enough, would it suffice to be able to plan ahead as we work through programming and all of the next steps that we need to take? So these are really useful questions to ask as we think about how we talk, like Jessica said, how we talk about collective impact of the sector, like the decisions on what to aggregate. For instance, we've found ways to aggregate population and output data. Are there more ways to do this? Other ways that we can show these results? And, we also hear a lot of questions around quantitative and qualitative data. How do you incorporate context, into understanding this collective impact? Adding contextual knowledge in data analysis. How do we make use of what we have, the lessons learned, and to help us improve our programming? So, for our next steps, we'll be looking at really advancing collective learning and knowledge translation. And this is where we'll be going into our discussions and talking a little bit more about that. So for us at CanWaCH, our next steps really with the Project Explorer is looking for ways to make it more interactive, a more useful tool, and increase the robustness of the platform. And with that, I'll stop here and I'll pass it back to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for that. So as mentioned, especially because we know we're at the end of a day, we thought it would be good for us to have a time to turn off or turn on our microphones and actually hear from each other. And that's what we hope to do. We know we have a limited time, so we're going to focus in the discussion rooms on these conversations, and we'll talk when we come back about how we will disseminate and share what you've come up with, so you get to hear what some of the groups have discussed. So Melody, Imayan, and myself will each take a group. We'll tell you a bit about the questions that we'll explore in each. But just to note, if you are one of our Spanish speakers, we encourage you to remain here with me, only because this is where the interpretation services are. But of course, you're welcome to go anywhere you'd like. And we're going to be talking about measuring collective impact, some of those pieces that Imayan was talking about talking about advocacy and the challenges of going up. If you join group number 2, you'll be with MIN talking about data at the project level, and that conversation will take place in English. And then finally, if you're one of our Francophone colleagues or would like to be having that conversation en français, you can join group 3 with Melody. What's going to happen is at the bottom of your screen, the groups are going to open up. You should be able to select the group of your choice. If you're having a problem with that, or you've got a version of Zoom where that doesn't happen, just write in the chat what group you want to be in, and we will do some quick magic and move you through. We'll start off in those sessions with a chance to ask any of the questions that we didn't get to, and then we've got some discussion questions for you. Don't worry, we'll share these again in the chat when you get into your group. But we'll be talking here about, how to tell that collective impact story and the challenges thereof. With MAN and Melody, we'll be talking a little bit more about those project level challenges and getting your thoughts and suggestions about how we could make this a stronger and more useful tool. What we'd like to maybe start off with is getting some of your feedback on these points about collective impact. And I'm thinking about some of the conversations that we've already been hearing and over the last little while, and in today's session, and there have been some questions about how to how we can better use this data. We were also just in a session, or I was just in a session where this question came up around local partners, right? And their connections to data, them being represented so that we can tell the whole of the story, but also their ability to access this data to use for their own advocacy purposes. So I'm curious to know if anyone here has some thoughts about that, and any ideas about how a platform like this could be more effective in representing the story of local partners is as part of that larger impact, or if that's something we shouldn't be thinking about. What are your thoughts and ideas on that?
Hi, Jessica. I'm happy to jump in, Joanna. Often opening opening discussions
the Canadian
in IATI. I was wondering whether the Project Explorer has any information actually about the local partners, to what extent, because what we saw of the Project Explorer was really quick and there was a lot there. So how much information do you already collect or share about the local partners who are involved in the projects that you have in the Project Explorer, and is that something that can be, is it already there, or is it just a little bit and you're hoping to expand it, or like how does it work? Because I know that for a lot of other platforms, if you want, that is a very challenging aspect, and there's some, on our project browser we have the first line of implementation, but we don't have any details about the next level of implementation, or the partners of our partners. And so I'm wondering how the Project Explorer does that, if it does that.
Great, thank you. So yes, what we currently collect on project partners is, we have an active database. So whenever somebody enters details on a project, they can provide us with the name of that partner and any URLs. We collected details on what kind of partner they would describe it as them as being, and we then have the ability to link that back to an identifier such as a business number or registration number. So a lot of times when we start off with projects and partners, it's a bit of a back and forth. It's like that we were talking about our pieces data drive. We might get a few names of a few partners, and we can then go back to those partners, get more, and ideally link through them. Once that happens, you can now search for that partner in our database. So once they get added in by organization X adds in the list of their local partners. That local partner is now searchable in the rest of our database. So if you go in and enter the name of that partner, you can now find any project that they are affiliated with. And so the idea for this is that you should be able to then see who else that partner has worked with, where else they may have, who else they may have partnered with and what they may have done. And where we kind of first identified that as a need was in the Haiti working group that Melody mentioned. So in that particular instance, we were engaged to support Canadian organizations who were working in Haiti because that was a very important area of response for Canada. And in presenting the map that we brought forward, because we collect geocoordinate level data on where projects work, in this meeting, it came forward that there were, there was overlap, right? There were some partners that were working with the same organization and had no idea. And so we realized that the map, and that only came to light because we had a map, and that map was pinpointing on a specific space, in this case, like a hospital, saying, oh, I guess we're all working at this specific hospital. What does that mean? And so we wanted the ability, if people want to disclose, and we realize that there are many reasons why we wouldn't disclose that. But if there are partners that we are disclosing, that you could be able to look to see who else they had partnered with, but also that those partners, those local partners, could turn around and see which Canadians were there, be able to approach them, be able to have those conversations about the work happening in their communities. And so we've tried to be able to link it back so that right now that's all we collect. We collect the name of the partner. We get a rough idea of what they are. Are they a CSO? Are they an academic institution? Is it a government? And anything our reporting partner can give us, such as a website, a registration number. And then based on that, we can do a little bit of fact finding and follow up. We recently did a pieces data drive specifically on local partners, where we asked organizations to provide us with that just to see what the response would be. And how we would go about getting it. And there seems to be some interest. So we would welcome, though, thoughts and ideas on how we could do that more effectively, or if there's other pieces of information that would make it helpful. But for me, that's one of the ways in which we think a platform like this, we hope, might be able to supplement IATI. Or some of the data that's there, because there's a very real connection between the partners and Canada in this case. And we're able to show the projects that they're a part of without also putting the burden, so to speak, of reporting on those partners. But would love thoughts from others on that, or how we might do that better. Does anybody have any kind of reactions to that as a concept, or have you seen other examples where local partners are engaged and what that looks like? I see Anand. Please feel free to come off mute.
Sure. Thanks a lot. My name is Anand, and I represent Fields Data. So we do something very similar to what you mentioned. We collect ground level information of different organizations working in the field, who does what, where, and when. And one of the problems we faced, or a kind of a feedback that we received from local organizations, was that we have been constantly giving data to bigger organizations, be it UN, OCHA, or any donor organizations, but we don't get anything in return. So they provide information, but over a period of time, they don't have an incentive to keep doing that. And the data quality keeps on degrading over a period of time. So one of the reasons I brought it up was because of this declining trend, and how do we address that as something that we need to keep improving on.
Mm-hmm. I think that is such a really important point. One of the things that we've been kind of the orientation that we took when we were developing the Project Explorer, as I believe you talked about as well, is really trying to come at this from a usability first standpoint. Our intention when the Project Explorer was kind of first conceived was that this was meant to be a tool to help people partner and help people program and talk about their work right here, right now. And that the larger question of accountability and transparency was part and parcel of that. And so that's one of the reasons why, although we have a lot of additional work that we want to do on our data visuals, for instance, or on our maps, we made that a priority in the work that we did. So we, always had the ability to be able to map right down to that geocoordinate level, down to the street view, if that was applicable for your project. Our visuals are in Tableau, open access. People can download them and use them. So we wanted to be able to at least say, if you're providing us with something, you can immediately use it, right? It's updated, it's there. You can take what tools we have and use them. We've also, that's why we've added in the option to be able to upload resources. So for instance, questionnaires that have been used and translated into a local language, so that if you see a project, you can actually look to see, can I contact that person and ask if I can, find out about their data set, or it looks like they did this kind of survey. I wonder if they have tools I could use. So that was one kind of way that we thought about, what are the things that we can offer when we are asking for information. The other thing that was a bit surprising, shouldn't have been surprising to me, but it was you may be aware that Canada has made very significant commitments to the health and rights of women and children. This is a key area of funding. And over the last few years that we've been active, there's been a few different calls for proposals and calls for funding. And we didn't expect it, but our Project Explorer ended up being a tool that a lot of global partners used to contact us in order to identify Canadian organizations who were working in their country with whom they would want to partner for these calls. And that to me was really interesting, because often we think about it the other way, right? That sometimes there's a bit of a scramble for partners if there's a call that focuses in a particular country, that can put a lot of burden on local organizations who suddenly find themselves with a lot of global attention. And, how can we challenge that? And so this provided a way that partners could say, oh, this is who is there. I would like to approach them about this opportunity and working with me. And we were also able at CanWaCH to broker that a little bit, because I would have people writing to me and asking me about that, and I could make some of those connections. So that's one of the things that we've thought about in terms of usability first. And we have found that through that, people are much more interested in giving us the data, because they can use it today to actually do something different in their work. And we're always trying to think about that and looking for other examples we can inspire ourselves from to make it really useful. And yeah, that's a big piece of it. I know we're just a few minutes left, but does anybody have any thoughts on that, or other things that you think would be particularly useful for us to consider including to make it more useful for our local partners?
Actually, going back to the question at the beginning about, kind of global impact and how we go about this, and what could we do in terms of this, showing the picture or explaining the global impact. I was wondering, I'm assuming that at this point that the results data that is available isn't quite of the quality that we would need probably to tell to tell a good story of impact and have the evidence to back it up. However, I wonder to what extent you're at the stage where perhaps you're able to show very clearly the gaps and say, well, if only we had that piece of data, look, this whole part of the picture would be much better, and we could start really seeing what's going on. And so have you, do you have any plans perhaps on providing that kind of feedback, or, kind of helping the community, the whole community, see where the gaps are and perhaps some of the priorities in terms of getting to the impact story?
Yes, so thank you. And I know we'll be having folks rejoin us as we come. So to that, there's two pieces. Absolutely, in terms of the gaps, that's something that, for example, we know that Canada is very interested in looking at what are typically called neglected areas of sexual and reproductive health and rights, areas that aren't commonly funded. And we have found that a tool like this really helps us say, okay, let's look at all the projects under SRHR, right? And we know that there isn't necessarily a code that maps abortion related initiatives, right? So how do we actually know if Canadian projects are working on issues relating to safe and legal abortion when there isn't a data code that exists on that? So we think a tool like ours actually provides an opportunity to do that kind of analysis, and also to be responsive to emerging issues that don't yet have a code for them. Not to say that's an emerging issue, but there are emerging issues and we can map that very well. And then going back to past data, I mean, again, when you're responsive, exactly, projects that are starting now don't really have results to share, right? It's a continual process. And that's why I think it's, we think of the idea of completeness or robust data as an ongoing project. It's something that we have to continue to do as we start to kind of move forward, but if we begin now, we can start to backfill and to build that up. And really would love to talk with folks here about things like this issue of what do we do when there isn't a code for the thing that we want to be tracking? How can we tell those stories more effectively and ladder that up into larger narratives? And the question around SRHR is just one very specific example, but I think an important one. So thank you. With that, thank you, everyone. I see that we have, returned back, and we definitely want to make sure that everybody has time to attend the final session of the day. So I just would like to conclude with just a few pieces. So we want to be able to share back some of the discussion that was had in each of the rooms, but rather than doing a report back, now what we're going to do is put together a short piece, either in written form or maybe with some video, about what we've taken from the IATI sessions and where we're going to go with that. And we'll be sharing that back if you're interested, so that you can hear a little bit more about the discussions, what we're learning from it, and where we're going with it. If you want to make sure that we send that to you directly, or if you would like to follow up and talk with us more about the Project Explorer, we're going to post in the chat this URL, which is just a simple Google form for your contact information. Or you can write to us directly at impact@canwach.ca. And we would be happy to follow up with you there to talk a little bit more about kind of where we're going and what we're doing. But I just want to conclude with my gratitude for letting us tell you about this initiative that we're very proud of, and we think that there's a lot of potential, but we also know that we have a great deal that we still have to learn, and are really eager to be a part of this kind of global community of data experts who can help us think through some of these pieces and see how the data that we're collecting can contribute to this larger narrative, and building really what one of my colleagues referred to as a culture of data engagement and a culture of data transparency. I think if we have any goal at CanWaCH around our data, it's to build that environment that really encourages seeing this as part of the way in which we work, and grapples with some of these challenging questions in interesting and innovative ways. So on behalf of myself, Melody, MIN, and all of us at CanWaCH, thank you again so much for your time and for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you at the closing session, and of course, look forward to being able to follow up with you directly after this. Thanks so much again.